Like, I like to manually control everything. I don't need all these, like, effects and shit like that. So then, anyway, I went into that thing that's the previous video I did that was on the bass. It was the sludgy, chunky, groovy, funky bass riff. That was like... There's like no distortion on it. It's on like 3. So that's gonna sound so much crazier than this. It's just too fuzzy. There's too much lint and fuzz and hissing and like, it's like, in other words, the philosophy I would use is the least amount required. So that sounds like it would be removing too much, but it's this that does the rest. See what I mean? Like, there's not that much on it. And that's going to breathe so much more. It's going to breathe so much more on the record. That's going to be drier and cleaner, and it's just going to hit so hard with the drums because now you have all that headroom, and you can make it just punch with it, you know what I mean? But it's just going to be like, shh, it's going to be all gobbled up by it. So see, look, it's like, if I play quiet, that's going to be how it's distorted, which I'm relying on this and this. And I'm using at least on the end. It can't be, like I said before, it can't be all 3 of them. So it can't be like a metal guitar with a metal pickup, with a metal amp, with a metal setting, and expect to sound it clean, you know? It's responding like a 2-band, even though it's not a 2-band, because the way you set it and how you play. That's the point I was trying to make earlier. So I can go... See what it's like, you can control it more this way. I don't know, you know? I might do a tiny bit more for the record, but like... Like, I don't like that, because that sounds like all those bands, you know? But now listen. Sounds a lot more like a guitar, and I moved it like 1 dot. Because the question, what do you really need on the album? Do you need constant overloaded circuits and distortion, all this shit blown at you? Or you need to hear the guitar part? You can't try to do all this crap to it and be like, why can't I get it? You have to change it. And a lot of things, see, now it sounds like an active pickup, even though it's not, it's a passive. It sounds like that, because I'm lessening it, so it's opening it up to give it the ability to respond. It's not going to do that like this. See, I'm picking just as hard, but it's not any more clear when I just maxed it out. I pick the same hardness, but it's getting swallowed up. It's not getting better. It's getting swallowed up. It's not getting more clear. You see what I mean? So I want this to do it. So it is based on how you play. And so just for a quick clarification, as I watch this back in the editing, what I'm saying here is that I want my hands to do it, so that it goes, the order that it goes is like hand, pickup, amp. And I want the pickup to do most of it. So instead of addressing it with the amp, I address it with the hand. So I want the power that I'm hitting it with to determine the distortion and not the amp. So what that means is, just from a logical equation, is that you reduce it down to the simple fact that The amp can't do it, but your hands can. And this means that the only way for this condition to exist is that you reduce the gain so there's more dynamics, so that you have the headroom to pick it hard, so that you have the headroom to do it. You see what I mean? So you have to work backwards and view it backwards for the solution. Like, oh, I can just do it with my hand on this side instead of the amp on the other side. So if you put a lot of distortion, you're stuck with that one static sound. Unless you feel like switching the channels on the amp with the foot switch or something. But still, it's like you can just eliminate that altogether. You can just use one sound. And there's a lot of great guitar heroes that were saying the same thing is, wow, it's crazy. You can actually use the volume knob on the guitar to lower it and the tone knob to kill some of the, sizzle and sibilance. And you can actually do more things right on the guitar than having to do all this stuff. So meaning that what I'm saying here is that I want to use my hands and not the amp, because with the amp I'm stuck, and especially with a lot of gain. So what does that mean? You're stuck with like a static sound that has no dynamic range. So whether you hit it soft or you hit it hard, it's the same dynamics and you're stuck. You see, so I don't have no room to play with my energy. I have no room to like make it go louder because I hit it harder and not be stuck with volume. So you see, it's not just level, it's dynamics. The dynamics can't breathe in the pickup to allow the sound to come through it. Like you're overloading it, essentially an oversaturation of gain. You're essentially overloading it by oversaturating it with pre-gain. So when you know what I mean? It's like control. The gain is controlled separate from the volume, but it's all about how you play. So you know what I mean? Through this backwards equation strategy, it's like, number one, you don't want to be stuck. And number two, you get the dynamic range. Number three, you feel more sense of control with your hands doing it than the amp being stuck. And number four, you work backwards to find out that, oh, it must mean that I have to turn the gain down. So this is like a fact I discovered now, but like you can't do that without the prerequisite, meaning in order to do that, it has to go down. So as long as it's not down, you're stuck. So you see, you don't have dynamic range. You don't have. So, and here's the funny thing. I prove it in this video with a 20-watt Orange Crush practice amp, the little shoebox practice amp, the little 10 watts and whatnot. And it's like a solid state amp with passive pickups. And I can make it respond any way I want because I'm working backwards to get to the end of the equation and answer that the distortion has to come down. And it can't be done without it. So you're stuck, you know what I mean? Unless you lower it. That's the answer. So it means, instead of backwards, now it's forwards. It means in this equation that if you put it high, it can't. That's the equation. If you put the distortion high, it doesn't have headroom. If you lower it, it does. That's how it works. So what I'm essentially saying in the final equation is you're either relying on your hands or the amp. So, you know what I'm saying? Like, and then notwithstanding, that brings me to point number two, which is just as important, and it's just as big of a point. So this is one of those things they confuse it. Where I was talking about in the previous video, one of the things I said to my drummer friend was, just forget it, man, these guys don't get it. They're misconstruing two different things, and it's a half-truth about another thing. They're just totally confused. One of the things I said to him was, about the drum triggers thing, this is one of those examples where they're confusing a drumming issue with an audio engineering issue. They're confusing a drumming issue with an audio production issue. They're confusing a drumming issue about the double strokes, or whatever, the blazing fast 300 beats a minute double strokes that are like rebound and momentum-based techniques. This is one of those things, like about the drum triggers. They were misconstruing a drumming issue about physical performance with audio production tasks and methods and whatnot, you see? So, like, coming at them with the misguided idealism, a 20-year-old ZFism, about, they have these misguided ideologies about shit that ultimately ends up being unimportant in the grand scheme of writing music. But, like, to just, because it was an insecure person trying to look important. So they use these, like, phony talking points to try to look strong and basically be dicks to each other, right? The kind of shit that the Jared Dines videos were about that I seriously resent. Those videos just going up to people at the Warped Tour shows trying to enjoy a show of their favorite band, and some dude comes up bullying with the misguided idealism and the false confidence about, like, just bullying about to name 5 bands on the, because they were wearing a t-shirt of a band they like, as if he's some judge of, like, if they're, like, it means they're not a real fan or something, right? And just coming at him with a misplaced idealism about it, like, as if that's an important thing. So you see, it's just a toxic force, it's just a negative force, and it's based on a lie and one of these confusions and false things, because I just hate videos like that. They're just built on an illusion that isn't true, and it's just nothing positive about it. It doesn't help anybody with anything, and it's just negative of some dude just going up, you know what I mean? Dude, it would just be some random person. What, so now you're the ultimate arbiter of what's good out there? You're the ultimate gatekeeper, friggin' music overlord, where, like, now just trying to insinuate that people shouldn't wear band shirts unless they could name the 5. Like, what does that even mean? You know what I mean? Like, who the fuck are you, dude? Like, and I think that dude's a scumbag for doing it. And, like, you're a coward and whatever, I don't care. The point is, this would be one of those misconstrued things, because they were coming at my friend with a false idealism about it. You're just confusing two different things and trying to connect it, and it's just really see-through that you're trying to use this to be confident or something and be an asshole, but it's like, it's not important. And what if they were just humble and put the work in and tried to get better? They wouldn't be saying shit like that, because they'd actually have it straight. You know what I mean? So a lot of inexperienced people push bad advice, but this would be one of those confusions, like, one of them's a drumming issue and another one's an audio production issue. And it wasn't a thing that was connected like that, and you can just use anything for anything, and you can make anything sound like anything. And what does it matter about being like a fake? They were trying to act like some moralists out here or something, you know what I mean? And that's not really what I'm trying to do. But there's just times where, like I said, I'm trying to go to my page and I get rage baited by like these things that are like, and I just try to turn it into a positive by teaching other people about it and explaining it, like what's what and why and how. But in other words, in conclusion, like I was telling my friend, they're just confusing two different issues and trying to connect it. So now circling back around all the way to the main point, because I had to lay that out as an example of what I mean by misguided idealism. Now that we established what that means, it was an audio issue mixed with a guitar issue. So like there's that stereotype of the experienced audio engineer endlessly wrestling with the egocentric guitars because of their tone preferences, right? Like it's that stereotype because the audio engineer is just trying to get good sound, and the egotistical guitarist is not budging on changing anything. And that's like how they get stubborn and like impossible to work with when, you know what I'm saying, you can't work with somebody that's insisting or refusing. Because then you're just looking for a robot, you're just looking for a slave. And that's the only time they would ever be happy, when it was like those tyrannical exploiter guys I was talking about coming up. It's like the narcissistic vampires, like, whatever. Just in all those experiences, it's really not a stereotype of cliche, and it is real because it's a stereotype because it is real because they're not understanding that one of them is an audio and sound issue, and another one is their egocentric tone preferences they're insisting on, and refusing any like experience or anything, education, whatever, from the engineer. So they'll get a crappy sound because they refuse to change the tone, but blame the engineer. So the egocentric guitarists in the stereotype are hypocrites. And if the guitarist was really interested in a good sound, they would just do what the engineer is saying and realize that their sound might not work. It might not be picked up by the microphone well. It might not, like in the final mix of the recording, it's just no matter what you try to do. And this is what I was trying to say. Because the guitarists that I knew that would say this stuff lacked the audio engineering experience, didn't understand these things. So the fact that I did both was the best option for me, so I'm not tearing my hair out, and I could just control everything I'm trying to do, and then through that experience 2 decades later I can tell you what's what, right? So you see how it all works out. It's like, rather than just endlessly waste energy wrestling with them, it's the fact that I have experience in both guitar and the audio recording. So what am I able to say from the experience in both? And it's that it's still true that the audio and sound should supersede the importance of an egocentric guitarist's tone preferences. Like, in other words, like if I was a guitarist and I wanted good sound, I would just, you see what I mean? Like, I would just do whatever was going to sound good. If there were suggestions or anything, but that's just, like I said, how they typically are as egocentric guitarists. But I'm saying as experience with audio that I'm always going to do what audio determines is a better sound. And I don't have the ability to be egotistical enough to just insist on it, but then it's a crappy thing and you can't get any good, and then just blame the engineer. You know what I mean? I wouldn't do that. I would always make audio a higher priority. Like, no matter what, I just want it to sound good. And whatever it takes, whatever works, that's what I'm going to do. So I would insist on the audio side of sound instead of with guitar amps and shit like that, and it's stupid. But at the same time, I had the crazy high level technique and strength, right? So I could do it, and it was like, I know, you know what I mean? I know as an audio engineer, it's the sound being clean, and this is the biggest point of the whole thing, circling back around to make all these side points, is that because of dynamics, you see what I mean? That's why it supersedes guitar preferences and whatnot, guitar tone settings and crap. It's just whatever it requires for the sound. So, you see what I mean? The major point I'm making is, so the point I'm trying to make is, when you have an experience with audio, you realize that everything is mixed together to sound good together and individually, both. And if just one of the things, which would be the guitar in this case, is oversaturating everything with the hissing, saturated gain, then it's just not, it's going to affect the whole rest of the mix. And not just being limited on volume and level because of dynamics, but also that it'll affect the rest of the thing. So, like, every time there's a gap in the music and the silence that makes music good, not the notes, but the silence before and after, it makes that space. You're just taking that all away because now it's all hissing, where otherwise we've just been drier and clean. So now the kick drum is more clicky and pronounced, and it's just, everything's just punches really hard, really clean, and everything's controlled with the level. So it's like, my philosophy with this is simplifying and refine. My philosophy is Jeet Kune Do, Bruce Lee. My philosophy is, if it doesn't need to be there, truly need to be there, just don't bother. Why? And it's to close this major concluding point as far as dynamics. So now the point I'm trying to make is that because of dynamics, you can always add more later, but you can't erase it when it's indelibly imprinted into the mix. That's the point I've been trying to make about dynamics. You can't erase the distortion if you tracked it and recorded it the way it was with too much. How you can't undo it? You can't, like, climb into the fucking waveform and, like, you know what I mean? You can't undo what the mic is capturing. You can't undo what the mic is capturing. You can't undo the gain because the mic is capturing the source, and the source was permanently that way. So then you track it to tape, and it's indelibly imprinted into the mix. So doesn't it make sense that you would use less instead of more? Because if you need it later, you can add it. But you can't now because you used too much in the initial first step. That's what I'm trying to say. This is troubleshooting. This is problem solving. This is retroactive discovery. This is like looking at things the other way, from the opposite perspective, to get to the answer. So, you know what I mean? It's like deducing an elimination down to the answer. So because of the fact that, so you would say, okay, it's indelibly imprinted in the mix. You can't erase it, but you can always add more. That's why they have multiple signal paths. So you always record the dry signal You know what I mean? And you can always change it later, right? So those are different tracking methods to avoid this problem. So why am I saying this and emphasizing it and stressing it? Because the way I always saw it is, now you're just opening another can of worms, another black hole in the fabric of the universe around you, in the sidewalls. It's like now you're just opening up a whole other path of endlessly compensating for side effects. Why? Specifically because just track it, like just get it recorded down with a good signal, with a good sound, and then you never have to change anything. That's the answer why you wouldn't do different signal paths to do the dry signal into a DI box, a direct input box. What I'm saying is you can eliminate these steps because they're not solutions like you think they are. They're just going to run risk of opening up another entire can of worms. So you're eliminating yet another unnecessary step that's not as necessary as you think, because the question is, don't you think if it sounded good, you don't have to change anything? You're not going to want to change it later altogether, all along. That's what I'm saying. If you have the perfect crunchy tracking tone for like rhythm guitar, then it's perfect. There's no need to change it later when it's perfect the way it is, which is done by initially doing things correctly and not using a lot of gain. Because you can always add more later, you can't erase it. So use less so you don't have to deal with that. And then you don't have to deal with different signal paths with a direct signal, and then because now you're just gonna want to change it. So you see, so now you're just gonna want to change it later, knowing that you can. It's like that open hole, it's like that open thing. And then from the future, you're never gonna be at rest, and you're always gonna know that you could start messing with it. And then you will start messing with it, and then, oh, I wish I just didn't record this and I did it this way now that I found the good sound. It's not gonna matter if you just do the earlier steps correctly. The sound is gonna be clean and transparent and clear and just crushing and devastating because of the dynamic. There's nothing else like taking it up, which would be distortion gain. So you see, you can always add more, but you can't erase it. So don't indelibly imprint it into the mix. Don't worry about these other like strategies. Just get a damn good tone, and you'll never want it. Like I've never wanted to re-record something. It was only when it was too much distortion. It was never when it was not enough. So and then you can get into the whole haywire crazy thing about matching the live sound with the record, and then they bring the they bring the effects unit on the road with them to guarantee it's the same. But like, yeah, genius, it might not work for that room. Like, so there's a reason why it's a different context live than recording it. Like I said a million times. They actually do sound good, those multi-effects units, but the problem is it makes the amp sound like when the other guy's using an amp, and it makes him sound like not good. So it just throws everything off. So when there's two guys using an amp, it's good, and when there's two guys using digital, it's good in their own isolated thing. But if it's one guy with an effects unit and another guy with an amp and the other guy's an amp, it's just not going to match. So like, you see what I mean? It's not fair for somebody to ask the entire rest of the band to change around and work around some egocentric guitarist tone preferences that doesn't understand shit about sound. Like, you know what I mean? Just play better, and it'll always sound good, because now the source is the pickups doing the work. It's like, it's not all this equipment shit you got to deal with. Just fucking play it really well, dial it back so you can hear it, and it's not getting all squashed up, and you will never need to do anything. So the context of a recording is different than the context of a live situation. They don't always mesh well and overlap well. So what these guys think are solutions, like do the different signal path, bring the same unit live on stage, it's not going to make, there's nothing universal in this. But you know what is? If you mic the fucking amp with the proper sound that you captured on the record, and then you use the same amp live, that's how you get it to, like, just do the shit right. That's how you would bring both and overlap it, the two different contexts of live and recording. You just have to be a good audio engineer and learn miking techniques and build your experience getting a good sound with the mic and bending the stand and doing and angling it. Like, these guys in this generation only know the technology and have no music, don't play that well, and are not audio engineers with any real like experience like that. You know what I mean? The leg work and the grunt work and hitting the pavement and putting the hours in it. So these guys would just buy their head rush units and quad cortexes and all these live multi-effects, but the environment is not conducive to the sound of the acoustics. So it's not just going to translate like you think because it sounds good in the studio, because they're two different contexts. So without using any descriptive words and without telling you what to think, I'm just going to give you this perfect, easy analogy example. Imagine the guitar sound from Angus Young from AC/DC, and then imagine the guitar sound of Metallica. So imagine the sound that you would imagine of AC/DC, and then imagine the sound of the guitar you would imagine with Metallica. So if you really listen during the parts where there's other instruments, it gets swallowed up and pushed to the background. It's barely audible, and the best case scenario, the best audio engineers in the world, $10,000 mic, studio, everything, and you can barely hear it. And it sounds no good because of whatever that fucking metal tone is they use. They take all of the body out of the sound. They take all the mid-range out of the sound and just remove it. So you get this hissy, saturated gain. There are ways you can use the mid-range without it sounding ice-picky or wonky or horn-like. You could use the Angus Young guitar tone if you wanted to play metal, but you couldn't use the metal to play everything else. You can use one of them to play everything, and the one only works in the one-dimensional way. You see what I mean? For the one-dimensional music style. And it's like, you see what I mean? Because the question is, I could take this Angus sound that's dry and loud and simple. It's, you know what I'm saying? So when it comes to how they actually write the music, one band versus another, the argument's out the window that you couldn't use the Angus sound. You could use that sound on Metallica songs, and it would sound better than the one they already used. It would just sound like a guitar again. It would sound clear and dry and not hissing. It would sound like the notes bloom and jump at you and there's impact, you know, which is part of the reason for the band's name. But you can only use the metal sound in metal. It doesn't sound good for anything else. And you can argue, oh, well, it's the writing of the music that uses it, that it enhances or it helps it. Yeah, but you could just use the other one too. So, in other words, something, the mid-range in this case, something that needs to be there isn't there. On top of something that doesn't need to be there is there. The hissing or whatever. So just the fact of the one knob on the amp, of the gain, the amount of saturation of those in the signal path, in those earlier stages of the signal, there's already too much of something, so everything down the line is just going to get, you know what I mean? Like, in other words, you shouldn't have to use like other pieces of equipment because you're staying with like one static thing that you're not budging on. And just, oh, well, whatever. And then, you see what I mean? It just costs the record label all this money and unnecessary shit. It costs people all this money and unnecessary shit you don't actually need. Like when Glenn Fricker from Spectre Sound Studios is talking about impulse response and compression and this and that. Dude, they only do this in metal, and you don't even have to use it in metal. Just put the mid-range back. Or when they're mixing it, you can do it. But then again, it just reinforces the original point. The mic isn't even capturing it because they took it out of the sound at the amp. So, in other words, you almost couldn't even fix it by putting mid-range in it later on in the mix. It's like, you know what I mean? If you would have put it on the amp, that's something happening in the order of events before the mic is on. So whatever you set the amp for the mic to actually capture, they just didn't put enough. You see what I mean? So there's actually some things you can't always just fix later in the mix. And a lot of people are lazy with the initial things that matter, like getting a good take instead of going 500 times torturing everybody. But then in order to do that, you have to actually fucking play well, which means practicing and rehearsing it before you go to the studio. And, you know, it's the earliest things you can do in the process, right? Is all that other shit you eliminate and don't have to compensate and counteract and counterbalance. Like, it's just more things you don't have to do later. So with audio and sound, the more things you initially get right, the less work you do later. But a lot of guys are lazy and they just want to skip everything and have fun in the studio for the experience of going to the studio instead of being focused on like being prepared to try to make a professional album, instead of doing all this bullshit and cutting corners and shortcuts and blaming the engineer. Like, so before I knew how to record, I had that dependence on other people to help me because I didn't learn it yet. So way long ago, 2 years before I even learned audio engineering, those first 2 years of guitar, it was like I had 50 songs already. So back when I didn't know how to record myself, it was through that having no choice that I learned it. The main reason I stick with the amp is because I started with the multi-effects unit with the recorders and everything, and I found that the amp is better. So with all the neural DSP and all that, what it has in clarity and articulation and response, it lacks in the character, and it's literally missing the room. That makes it, like, you know what I'm saying? That's what I'm saying about acoustics and all that, is that it's a perceptual experience, and you're trying to simulate it with this digital shit that literally doesn't have that because it wasn't a room being mic'd. It contributes to the sound. So the amp, just the way that the amp responds. So, you know what I mean? What the neural DSP lacks, the amp has. What the neural DSP has in responsiveness and clarity and articulation, it lacks in character and warmth and punch and impact that the amp has. So even though the amp doesn't have as much response and articulation, I don't care, because that's what makes a sound process and sterile and homogeneous. I don't care if I don't have that, because I know that if I get a good character and response from the amp, nothing sounds like that, and the room is playing a part, and I can just add what I need later, you see? So it's two different starting points, two different philosophies. The main reason why I stick with the amp is because I started off with the multi-effects units that had the recorders on them, and as good as it sounded in that isolated context, I used it live once, and it just made the actual real thing sound like crap. It made the other guitar player's amp sound unreasonable, even though that was the actual real thing. So then it would just be these egotistical guitarists, like I said, that, like, so I didn't want to be like them, so I never did again. I only used it once live, and I just went back to the amp. And then as my technique got better of actually playing the instrument, I noticed that when I'm playing good, it doesn't make it sound more good when you add distortion. It's as you get good. It's just something that, like, you'll see what I mean if you play at that virtuoso level. You'll see what I mean when you get that experience, and you'll be like, yeah, now I know what you mean. Like, it was looser before, and like flubby, you know what I mean, and blubbery. It was just the way that the sound sounded. So over the years, I figured out how to make the passive respond like an active pickup. I figured out how to make a solid state amp respond like a tube amp. And it wasn't by equipment. It was reducing the influence of the equipment and increasing my skills. So at the same time, it's not just a cliche that tone is all in your hands, because it's just a different method using the pickup instead of the amp to do it. Not only is that one not a cliche, but another one that's not a cliche is that it shows you looking at it in reverse. The ones that use all the high gain distortion don't play that well, because if they did, they would turn it down too. That's the point I was trying to make. It's so as you actually strike the string harder, You see, so again, it's choking up the pickup from being able to translate the wood through the sound. It's choking it out. It's closing off the space for it to come through. So it's not like the tone woods thing, the tone woods argument, but it's sort of connected to it. But it's like, why? It's going to be this unrelated sort of thing that overlaps with it of actual technique. So the ultimate final example I can give of proof, conclusively proving that like the tone's in the hands. It's just a matter of if it's the pickup or the amp. The less hard you strike it, the less strength you have in your muscles to strike it, the less you're causing it, you know what I mean? So like I said, it's not about better or worse. I knew several other different guitarists. Because I knew guys that played super gently and light, and they could use that ultra processed high gain sound, and it would kind of sound good. But once you play hard, like it's already high gain, it's already too much. That's what I'm saying. When it's like you have a metal guitar with metal pickups and a metal amp, it's like it's already high gain. So the pickup, it's just too much on top of it from the amp. So it means that one of the factors in the 3-factor equation has to be reduced to balance it. Like something has to come down. It can't just be all full power all the time, because it's just not going to be as good as it could be, because you're adding too much on the top side. Like you're adding, you know what I mean? It's too top heavy. So it's like a Bodie sound. It's like Bodie and flubbery. So, but like I said, I knew those guys that played. Now you have other styles. So I'm telling you, looking at the guys that don't have the crazy technique, it'll sound all right if you just play super gently. That's the only way to make the ultra compressed sound good. It's squashing up all the dynamics, so you almost have to play soft. But when you play it hard, the pickup's already a hot pickup, so it's not going to be able to breathe with the amp distortion on top of it. They're two like quote metal things, so it has to either be the amp or the pickups driving it. It can't be like both of them and max out. Why? Because the playing strength of your muscles hitting it, striking the string, is going to determine the activity of the pickup, the behavior of the pickup, the response of the pickup. The strength of your hands proving this point is going to make the pickup work more or less, whether it's active or passive. It's going to make the pickup work more. But you see, that's where we get to the same exact outcome. But it can't come through the sound if there's distortion on top of that. You see, it's oversaturating it. So the pickup's already a hot pickup trying to do it, and then you just overwhelm it with this. But it actually sounds good if you have a hot pickup and turn the gain lower, because now the pickup's already doing it a lot, because you're playing better, you're striking it harder, so the pickup is responding more. So you have to open up the rest of the path by not adding too much gain after the fact. You see, so the pickup's already hot, the pickup's already working, but you're closing it off and squashing it out once you go with the amp. So what I'm saying is the hot pickup will actually sound better when you reduce the gain, because it can breathe more and function more correctly. It's actually able to function. It's not being squashed. So what this is a simple matter of two things are already strong, but it's too strong overall. So you have to, like, the pickup's not going to work right with too much amp sound. So, but like, that's what I mean. If you want like openness and transparency, if you want flexibility in the sound, you need to reduce it. And again, it's all tied to the ability of the player at striking the strings. That's why they say the tone is in the hand. So looking at it one way, looking at it another. The best players use single coil pickups. All the Fender Stratocaster players, all the virtuosos. Why? Why do you think that is? Why do they like the lower output? And it's because it's clearer, it's cleaner. There's not too much of something in the equation. So that's the proof. You know what I mean? All the super virtuoso, Yngwie Malmsteen, Eric Johnson, Eric Clapton even, Stevie Ray Vaughan, they all use Stratocasters because it's a lower output single coil pickup. It's not a hot humbucker. It's like they purposely use it because it's cleaner. Because when you play that well, you want them to hear that it's you doing it. You don't want something in the way of that, obscuring it, blocking it, choking it from coming through. You want them to hear it. Like, why would I undermine myself like that? Why would I undermine incredible technique with crappy setting? So they use the lower output pickup. You can hear all the clarity and articulation. You can hear it. And the worst players are always like the teenage long-haired metal guys that are just starting and they play all the old classic stuff, but it's just this like horrendous sound. That's, you know, it's not even like even if you had too much mid-range and it would sound like a radio or something, that's still better overall in the audio mix. You know, there's not really low end in guitar. If you really look at these expression maps, if you really look at the frequency spectrum, it's not hitting it. If you take any app and isolate the guitars out of anything, there's like no low end. It's just mostly mid-range because the bass, everything else is picking it up. But you see, if it had it already, it wouldn't allow it to do that. It would choke it out. So the other stuff, like the bass and the drum, the other stuff's not going to come through. It can't do that. Like we finally do a good thing and then undermine it. That's what I'm saying. So it's just always something. I always say that since the beginning, audio is about less is more, because the dynamics it'll do it instead. So it's a thing where they're like through the ego, they're just insisting on the thing because it's almost like they have no faith, that they're faithless about having a better alternative or solution. So because of that fear, they cling extra tight. And it's like, but what if I told you there's a better way? And now you can abandon that and feel safe about abandoning it because here's this better thing. You know what I mean? So they just wouldn't be so much about it. Like, you shouldn't have to dial in all these things and fine tune all these things to finally get it to fucking sound good. But like, it just tells you that on the front end, something isn't right and is being overdone, and it doesn't allow the rest of the shit to work in the order of events. And you would think it's just common sense, but when you're experienced audio engineer dealing with like a bunch of gumballs, that's what you get. So it's like speaking as an audio engineer and a guitarist of a virtuoso level. I'm telling you that I can get it to sound good. It's like if they just trust me. It's like when you hear the guitar in some of my tracks, there's just endless headroom. You could add like 100 guitar tracks and nothing will, like, you know what I mean? It has this immense headroom. So it's like, think about antimatter, or think about the negative space. Think about the obverse energy that it's like, that's playing a part. So the silence, not just the notes, is what makes music have the impact and the sense of movement. That's how the best engineers in the world know how to use compression to work with the dynamics, compress the dynamic. They understand that you have to work backwards. So you start with the threshold all the way up, and then you turn the knob to the left backwards, counterclockwise. So just finding the sweet spot where you can't really hear it working, or you can barely hear it working, but you'll never be able to accurately judge it if you start from the bottom and turn it up. It'll just warble into the warmth. You won't be able to find the sweet spot. So these lines of logic is like, start out with it maxed out and then go back. So turn the gain to 10 and go back. Turn all the threshold to 10 and then go back, and then you'll know. So this same line of logic with the reverse perspective works for everything, and it's connected to everything. And it's like, if they just had faith, it's like, look, I just need you to have confidence that the dynamics will do what you think will be missing, that you're trying to make the distortion do it. But if you back off on it, the dynamics in that negative space is going to be like the strength and fuel loading up underneath it. It's like, it's going to be the thing propelling it and give it the sense of propulsion and impact. It's like, it's not the actual positive affirmative force of the distortion. The dynamics will do it when you say less is more. It's just how sound works. The guys that take all the mid-range out and jack up all the gain, it's like they're not planning on playing shit we need to hear, which is nothing bad. You can tell, is what I mean. So see how the gain sounds like treble? That's gain, that peak maxed out at the peak. But it's like, it's just fuzzy, like I can't do anything with it. That's the issue. I'm sorry, but to me that doesn't sound as good as this. Whatever I had it on before. So it doesn't sound to me as good as that does. That's more clear. It's like, why would you fill up the little gaps and spaces with why? Why would you fill it up? If there's nothing that needs to be there, why put it there? It's just filling up what would otherwise make the drums hit harder, because the drums isn't what you hit, it's the silence after. That gives the next one power. It's the silence in between the notes. And then you're just going to cover it up with this, like it's just killing it. Well, why do you need that mask over it and that static over it? And you don't think it would matter, but it matters. You can get so much more volume and level out of less distortion. But it's not because the distortion affects the level. It's that the dynamics can't breathe. So once again, like the earlier one, you can, like, let's say the intro of a song only has one part. I can make that all the way loud, but I can't keep it all the way loud when the other stuff comes in. So you're using dynamics almost like a level trick. So, like, it's only one thing going on. It's like a little guitar part in the left. It's only like one thing happening. You can make it all the way loud, but when other things are introduced into the mix, you have to turn it down. You have to make them all fit. So a good audio engineer's job is, how do I go from like a riff like that? And then before all the stuff kicks in, how do I get the most out of it? The less things that are going on in the song, the more you can turn it up loud, because of dynamics, not level. You can do the level because of the dynamic. So it's not because it's just that easy and it's just basic. There's just more to it than that. That's only one half of the element. So the dynamics is why, okay, the drums come in, the bass comes in, the other guitar, the other side comes in. Everything comes in. A good audio engineer, you have to make it sound like you don't notice any volumes change. And it's just, it goes from one part that's all the way loud to being died down when the other stuff comes in, level-wise. So the level can be like this, because there's only one part playing. It's the only thing going on, so not only that, but it can take up all the rest of the stereo field and the space from left to right. It's just one thing happening, nothing's competing with it. Cool, but other things come in, it can't stay that loud, because then you would never get the drums and the other things up to it. It's already if you left it maxed out. You go from the intro guitar riff and then you go in, it's like once the other stuff comes in, it's not gonna, you have to make an illusion by putting it down, and then these are like still here. But their little bit of volume, you see what I mean, fills it up where it was before in the intro. So this takes over, and this has to come down. It can't be like loud intro guitar riff and all the stuff kick in, because this stuff's going to be down here. Because this is, you see what I mean? This is going to be stuck down here. So this is really the true level. But it's not because this is high. It's because this is zero, not this. This is zero. And I'm creating illusion by making everything else lower than it. So as an audio engineer, the snare and the kick is usually what I make the loudest thing. That's the best measuring point of the sense of movement and dynamics, right? Before I ever do any compression and dynamics, I always make it, that'll always be where zero is. So it's going to just be a counteracting thing like that. So what you're really doing is you're getting those effects, you're getting that impression without actually doing it. So it's not that this is louder than this, it's that this is turned down. You see, so what does that mean for the intro guitar riff over here at the beginning? It means if you were to move this over and then look at the beginning, this volume is higher than 0. Because you can get that little yellows on the meter. It's like a little bit is okay. And that's how you get the character and the bite of all the like rack effects. But I'm saying that you can get away with turning it up loud. But how can you have to turn it down. So you turn this down too. The loudest guitar in the beginning, you would turn it down. And then this would go here. You see? So this can never be here with this or this. You're trying to achieve this effect, but you have to do it. So you know what I mean? If you were going to force it. But normally you would just go intro guitar lift. Here's the volume. It's the only thing that can be this loud. And you have to make it a smooth trend. Like once the stuff kicks in on a dime, all of a sudden, you have to not notice that the drums are actually louder than this, and because this came down. You see? So like it's like loud and then everything comes in, this goes down. So over here, everything's just like moving like that. So you can never get it up to it. And this is just some of the basics of gain, staging, and